The shocking reason why Ukraine loves when Russian soldiers use their smartphones. Imagine this. You're a Russian soldier deep in the trenches, and you whip out your smartphone to call for backup. 5 minutes later, an artillery strike obliterates your position. Guess what tipped off the Ukrainians? That little gadget in your hand. Hey friends, Wes here, veteran of the US Army and the US Air Force, and today we're diving into the mind-blowing world of battlefield intelligence and why Russian soldiers' cell phones are Ukraine's secret weapon. I've been smoke-free for some time now, but in my infantry days, I used to light up a cigarette from time to time. After all, the infantry is 90% sheer boredom and 10% terror, and we usually filled the boredom with smoking and some really dark humor. But when we deployed either under real-world conditions or training in the field, smoking became a chore. Ask any infantryman. There's a very peculiar way that soldiers cusp a cigarette with the ember hidden in their closed hand. We did this because the ember of a lit cigarette lights up night vision like a big red target to the enemy that says, "Shoot here, please." Using a personal cell phone in a war zone is the modern equivalent of lighting up a smoke on a dark night. Your location can and will be picked up by the enemy. Cell phones use several different families of communication protocols: SMS, MMS, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and GSM, each with its own security vulnerabilities and unpredictable interaction effects. Then there are the network exploits. Network providers use signaling protocols that have known and more or less unfixable weaknesses. This means that more than half the attempts to tap calls made on 3G succeed, while 9 out of 10 SMS messages can be intercepted. The FBI really wasn't joking when they recently told all of us to start using the secure messaging app Signal. But from a military perspective, there are two main ways that a soldier's personal cell phone can be tracked. The first is through the cellular network. When a soldier turns on his phone, it connects to the nearest cell tower. This sends a signal to the network operator, AT&T, T-Mobile, etc., which can then track the phone's approximate location. Thanks to the surveillance disclosures of the 2010s, brought on mostly by Edward Snowden's whistleblowing, we now know that the US government has interceptors listening in to all the world's network providers. Now, this formidable eavesdropping apparatus is not restricted to the US. Many nations like Russia, China, France, the UK, and more listen in as well. It's a party line and the neighbors have itchy trigger fingers. My audience tends to trend toward more mature, so I'm sure a lot of you know what a party line is. My kids sure as heck wouldn't understand. The other way a soldier's phone can be tracked is through GPS. All modern consumer phones have built-in GPS, which can track the phone's location with great accuracy, even if the device is not connected to a network tower. In the case of Russian soldiers in Ukraine, the NSA then uses a combination of signals intelligence and imagery intelligence to build a shockingly precise map of Russian troop movements. This information is then quickly shared with our Ukrainian partners so they can target them with artillery, ATACMS, or HIMARS. F-16s, Bradleys, and other US hardware might be more sexy to cover for journalists, but the biggest windfall of the US-Ukraine partnership is actually the intelligence sharing, which barely gets any press at all. On every deployment I went on, whether with the US Army or the US Air Force, we implemented very strict protocols on personal cell phone use. On some more tactical deployments, we didn't bring cell phones at all. And this is before we even start talking about Russian soldiers posting on social media from a war zone. But first, at its most basic level, what we're talking about here is OPSEC, or operational security, which is itself just data security. For the same reasons we probably shouldn't broadcast our positions to the enemy on the battlefield, we also shouldn't be broadcasting our personal information all over the internet back home. But sometimes you have no choice in the matter, and your data is simply stolen through a data breach. In 2015, my military security clearance records were breached through the Office of Personnel Management in a hack that targeted SF-86 forms, the US government form that the government employees have to fill out to receive security clearances. Which is why I'm proud that this video today is sponsored by Aura, a service that I wish I had in 2015 when I had to manually do damage control after my personal information was hacked. The amount of time that I had to spend manually setting up alerts on my name and members of my family, changing passwords, writing down every email address I've ever used, and constantly checking my credit to make sure I wasn't the victim of financial fraud. It was a mess. And honestly, I felt helpless. I did my job and was careful with my data, but it was a breach from an organization, OPM, that I had no control over. Aura is an all-in-one intelligent safety solution that's simple to understand and easy to use. Aura's identity theft protection monitors your personal data, including your social security number, across billions of data points like the dark web and public court records to alert you about potential identity theft. Every adult on the account, up to 5, gets $1 million in identity theft insurance to help cover eligible losses and fees, with a total of up to $5 million in coverage. That tells me that they are confident in their service. I get all of this in one app at one affordable price. I'm not leaving myself and my family vulnerable like I was in 2015 to data breaches. And if you don't want to either, Aura is offering my viewers 2 weeks for free at aura.com/Wes O'Donnell. 2 weeks is enough time for Aura to find out if any of your personal data has been exposed. Thank you to Aura for sponsoring this video and helping my viewers stay protected. Back to cell phones on the battlefield. Researchers for Bellingcat, the open source intelligence website, used Russian soldiers' social media posts to forensically trace the entire journey of the Russian military unit that transported the Buk missile launcher, which likely shot down Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 over eastern Ukraine in 2014. Bellingcat used painstaking geolocation to work on selfies the soldiers uploaded to popular Russian social media platforms like VK to determine the whole route. Some Russian soldiers made the job a lot easier by photographing themselves in front of place name signs along the way. So you would think that these soldiers would see the danger and refrain from using their personal smartphones while in Ukraine in 2024. Actually, the Russian government is actively working to clamp down on this practice. Its lower house of parliament, the State Duma, recently proposed an amendment that would allow its soldiers to be punished for using their personal phones while fighting in Ukraine. But here's the thing. I don't believe Russian soldiers are using their cell phones because of a lack of discipline. I mean, sure, they're undisciplined in terms of using the precise amount of force when necessary, basic soldiering skills, and commitment to the mission. But in this case, I think personal cell phone use is more a symptom of a lack of secure communication on the battlefield. In reality, Russian soldiers are using their personal devices to transmit target coordinates and call for fire from Russian artillery and drone operators. They're also using them to coordinate between units and navigate in areas close to the front lines, where the line between Russian forces and Ukrainian forces can be measured in meters. There is anecdotal evidence that some Russian units are using civilian off-roading and hiking apps, which are unencrypted, to mark the locations of Ukrainian units. The US military has had its own fiasco with unencrypted apps, particularly the fitness tracking variety. Back in 2018, online fitness tracker Strava published a heat map showing the paths its users log as they run or cycle. The problem? US soldiers were using the app while exercising at deployed locations, which revealed the structure of our military bases in countries, including Syria and Afghanistan, as soldiers move around them. So I think this is a case of the Russian soldiers knowing the risks, but using them anyway because they're not getting support from the Russian military to accomplish their assigned objectives. And trust me, the risks are severe. In late 2022, Ukraine launched a devastating precision strike against Russian troops gathered in Makivka in the eastern Donbas, killing at least 100. The Kremlin blamed the high death toll on its own soldiers, saying that Kyiv found their location thanks to their cellular data. And if the Kremlin had provided its soldiers with secure communications network, this may never have happened. Even Russian military bloggers have entered the conversation. One blogger called Veteran Records said, quote, "Nowadays, Gadgets are needed in war, not just by individual specialists. Now literally every soldier needs a gadget in war, and this is not a luxury or a whim, it is a necessity dictated by time and circumstances, end quote. Yeah, as an American veteran, I can tell you how insane it is to send troops to a war zone with no communications equipment and expect them to get the job done. Of course, they're going to take their chances with their personal phones. But military communications are expensive, and Russia would rather blame its troops for security lapses than equip them for success in their illegal war. And this is not to say that all civilian tech on the battlefield is a bad thing. Actually, one clever Russian soldier used a self-created smartphone app to triangulate Ukrainian artillery positions. Small teams of soldiers with smartphones or tablets disperse a few kilometers behind the line of contact. They use an app that detects the acoustic signature created when a Ukrainian artillery gun goes boom. Their devices relay the information to another app that triangulates the position of the gun. A drone confirms and refines the location. The command then targets the location with counter battery fire. Still, Russia's lax OPSEC rules on the battlefield, whether out of necessity or indiscipline, is Ukraine's game. With their formidable intelligence partners in NATO, Ukraine will continue capitalizing on Russian soldiers' cell phone use on the battlefield. Russia's only alternative is to enforce, somehow, a personal device ban for its soldiers in Ukraine. Even if they could succeed at that task, the results would be devastating at the tactical level. Russian units would no longer be able to communicate and coordinate, which would result in more losses and more Russian deaths, and more backlash back home. So the average Russian soldier is in a no-win situation. In the early days of the global war on terror, we used to have to stand in line to use a secured phone to call home to loved ones. We got no more than 5 minutes every month. This is probably why we smoked so much. No cell phones were allowed, at least not where I was. So we had to pass the time with another bad habit. As for Ukraine, Russian cell phone usage in the field is a feature, not a bug, of the Russian military, one that Ukraine should keep exploiting. That's it for today, friends. Subscribing really helps the channel grow, so please consider hitting that big red button. With your help, this channel has grown very quickly in the last few months of 2024, and I'm excited to see what we can do in 2025. And as always, glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. Slava Ukraini.